Next up, we have our first panel discussion on building an integrated infrastructure for a better metaverse to ensure seamless VR and AR experiences. It is indeed an honor for me to introduce our renowned panelists. Let's start with our eminent moderator, John Morton, CTO, CIO, CDO Transformation, TASMU Digital Valley, Mr. SUDHIR SYAL, Chief Business Officer, Middle East LENSKART, Mr. Ryan Johnston, PhD researcher, Ulster University, Dr. SALIM AL-SHUAILI, Senior Executive and Expert Digital Transformation, AI, Big Data, 4IR Advanced Technologies, National Center of Space AI at Ministry of Transport Communication and IT, Sultanate of Oman, Mr. SHIJU VARGHESE, Digital Transformation Expert and FINTECH Leader, and Mr. Raghuram JOSHI, Senior General Manager, Expert Technology Solutions, BOSCH Global Software Technologies. I now hand this over to the moderator, Mr. John Morton, to go ahead and lead the discussion. Over to you, John.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for such a stimulating and thought-provoking first session from our previous speaker. Before we get into a lot of questions and uncover the detail behind building that infrastructure, I thought it was useful if each of our speakers, our panelists, just gave us a 1 or 2 minute introduction of themselves and their key promise or their key hope about the metaverse and how it's going to help retail. Shall we start with Salim?
Hi, good afternoon or good morning. I don't think there is some good evening with anyone here. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be among you giant people here to discuss, and I really enjoyed what Ms. Mariam has given the stories and really give insights about metaverse. Of course, my name is Salim AL-SHUAILI. I have done my PhD in ICT technology adoption for IR technologies. I am working currently in the National Center for Space, Artificial Intelligence and Advanced Technologies in Sultanate of Oman. Really about metaverse or augmented reality, virtual reality. Definitely, we are expecting a lot. First, there are lots of applications for these technologies. How to link with other technologies, like for example, blockchains, NFTs. How to conserve, like for example, heritage and culture. To conserve lots of things in our life, in our planet. So I am sure my colleagues, they are going to give insights about the metaverse, its application, the adoption of these technologies, and really I am eager to hear this one from everyone. Thank you, thank you, John, for giving the chance. Thank you.
SUDHIR, let's hear from you.
Great, John. Thank you so much, and thank you. It's a privilege to be on this panel. Just to introduce LENSKART. LENSKART is really a new age fashion eyewear company. We are perhaps Asia's largest eyewear company. We have over almost 1,000 stores across India, Southeast Asia, and now the Middle East, with very ambitious plans of growing in the region. And we've really diversified and with a focus on AR, VR, and also a belief on what the metaverse holds. Right, and if you use the LENSKART app or if you or on the LENSKART website, we have a patented technology called 3D try-on, which allows you which scans your face and then recommends eyewear basis your face type from our over 10,000 styles, which has been one of the key pillars for the company as it's grown and scaled globally. Right, and I think the metaverse holds a lot of promise for fashion brands like ours, and I think it's a form of actualization for people and for Gen X and Gen Z, where they like to adorn fashion in the real world, they also want to adorn fashion in the metaverse to gain that social cred which everybody yearns for today.
Thank you. And if we move on to SHIJU,
Good afternoon. Hi, John. Thank you for the time. Thank you, eminent panelists. It's really exciting to be here with some of the esteemed colleagues here to discuss and talk about Metaverse. Just to give you a background of myself, my name is SHIJU VARGHESE. I'm a FinTech collaborator. A few Metaverse proof of concepts are some of the experiments that we are doing currently with ADGM. I'm part of those conversations that's actually happening. My background is more into financial institutions and digital journey designs. We've also been on the payment side of the retail experience with customers. So Metaverse does hold a huge. I think there is more knowledge in this room right now, and hope we can give the audience a wonderful discussion, which they can take back and possibly apply into their real life experiences and use cases that they would do within their enterprises. So thank you everybody for this time.
Excellent, thank you. Our academic, Ryan from Ulster University.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing everything from our other panelists. It's really, really exciting to have the opportunity to learn from everyone else, as well as to share a few of my own thoughts. Currently at Ulster University, studying a PhD, looking at using immersive technology to be able to communicate to a range of stakeholders around embodied carbon solutions to help create sustainable technologies and sustainable futures based on Norwegian standards around zero emission neighborhoods. I've kind of taken an interest in this from previous work as a senior geospatial technologist with a UK government think tank, Connected Places Catapult, where I was responsible for creating simulation environments to test new technologies such as self-driving cars. I think all of this kind of comes together in terms of my thoughts of the metaverse, which is very much a system of systems, being able to combine various data sets and new technologies and working in a very innovative way to create new solutions, and very much around that communication piece.
Thank you. Raghuran, where are we?
Hello everyone, and really thank you for inviting me on this panel. It's really a very diverse set of panelists, and I'm really looking forward to listen from each one on the different aspects of Metaverse and how they are experimenting and using and benefiting from this. So to just talk about myself, I work with BOSCH, and we have been using much of the technologies which together today converges into what is called as Metaverse. And we have been working on blockchain, we have been working on AR, VR, XR, and the whole lot of stuff around building solutions which would today, let's say, I would say it's ready to be migrated into the Metaverse scenarios. So I'm really happy to be part of this panel. And for me, Metaverse has three essential aspects. One is the multi-technology that many of my co-panelists talked about. Then it's the sociality part of it. Yeah, how do we interact with others, whether it is avatar or otherwise? How do we interact with other beings in the social in this meta world? And then it's the concept of the hyperspace. How do we use the space available to probably bring to life, maybe even in the digital world, you're taking a digital twin in creating that immersive experience that some of my colleagues here have talked about. So really looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. And for myself, I love that ending there. You talked about the multi-technologies, the social aspect of and the engagement, the new engagement through the XRs. You talked about hyperspace. I think there's two other things that really I see within the multiverse. And one is the fact that you've got to bring these different data sets together to help enable it. There's a little bit of legwork to do that. And then the third one, and this goes back to things like LENSKART. Once you've got this environment, you've got a huge opportunity to do innovation and to try many different things to see what people like before you move towards the production line. And it's going to completely revolutionize the way that we think about how we're going to do surveys and develop out our product set. So my background is very much the engineering side of taking things and making them work. So let's move on to the very first question. And this question's for Shishu to start with, but please all think about your own responses. We are all talking about the Metaverse 1.0. So when we start to look into the future, and what is that future? How can we evolve? And what's it going to look like? What can we possibly see in each of the future phases as we start to evolve the Metaverse?
Thank you, John. This is an excellent question. So, John, I think it'll be very humbling for me with somebody who's eminent like you, to be chairing this event to talk about Metaverse future. I think my guess would be second to none. But despite that, I'll try my best to give a response to this, how I would look at it from Metaverse as an evolution that we would see. Metaverse has been around for a while, as we are all aware, but I believe one of the things that we have to look at is every technology has some sort of an inflection point. I think people started talking about Metaverse in 2021. Thankfully, with the kind of advert that we got from Facebook as such, because of all their transformation as an organization to focus on the Metaverse as such. But this doesn't mean all the other enterprises that we look around have not been looking at it as a technology. They've all been doing their hands at it. So how do we see the current technology that's available there, and where do you see that evolving? And that's the gist of the question here. I think what we are seeing is somewhere right now, a conversation where Metaverse is interfacing with virtual reality as such. This is evident from all the solutions that's out in the marketplace today. We have somewhere we have the actual reality and virtual reality there. We have the games of Roblox, Fortnite, and all these kind of gaming experiences that's out there in the marketplace. So that interaction is happening. But what we are going to see going forward, that's the big question. What's this evolution going to look like? Let me give you an example to it. We've all known that Amazon was a long way. In 2000, they had the e-commerce setup. Everything was great. And we saw the stock tank in 2008. It kind of tanked. And people who were all supporting the e-commerce, many of those issues were not resolved. For example, let me talk about how would the last mile delivery happen? But we saw that the inflection point happening towards the pandemic, and it kind of changed. It was already up there, and it went into mass acceptance there. So the question on Metaverse is, when is it going to be mass adopted? So that's the most important thing. As a creator, as organizations that's thinking about it, I think this is the right time to talk about it and to find. What the long term would hold, I believe, if I were supposed to look into a crystal ball, I think the convergence where the technology would move from visual seeing experiences to sensory, like touch, smell, and those kind of experiences, I think that will be transcending. I think that will be something which will be the final frontier where the technology will be adapted. But I think there is more, and there might be things that we haven't seen. We could have convergence of simultaneous technologies whereby quantum computing and those things would help to evolve, to facilitate the Metaverse. So I think it has to be a cohesion of all these things. So there will be convergence of every other aspects. It's not Metaverse alone, but there will be an ecosystem of other developing technologies that will integrate, which can give customers that retail experiences. So I think that would be the key, John.
Okay, and any other thoughts from our panelists? Any other perspectives? Ryan, I'm sure you have a perspective on this. What are you seeing coming out of the future in academia that you think might be appropriate?
I think Well, I think it's difficult to say precisely because of two parts. One, the research being done in academia can be done in sort of small scale samples, and it takes a while, if ever, to be able to transition into the actual marketplace. There's kind of this, what they describe as a valley of death. So you kind of have an early idea. NASA came up with this concept of technology readiness levels, kind of between 1 and 7, and early stages, kind of early ideas, early academic research. After that, it's a proof of concept. It can take a while before that actually gets funding, before it's actually ready for mass adoption. And it's that kind of valley that's quite difficult to overcome. So you potentially have a lot of useful academic research trapped in that little bubble. On the other side, then you have new technologies being developed by industry. We think of HTC, Meta, and the like. And that doesn't always transition directly into the scientific papers and journals for research, because it's so quickly adopted and developed that they're already on to the next iteration. And there's a bit of a lag time there. And I think the better that we can bring those two parties closer together, I think we'll see a lot more innovation happening faster that's more useful for the marketplace.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? If not, what I'd like to do is to move on into, okay, how do we use the metaverse? So Sudhir, how do you see fashion brands embracing the metaverse?
That's a great question. So, I think I'd like to cite some examples of what Gucci and Balenciaga and other brands have been doing in Roblox and other places, right? And if you notice the case study, Gucci has a certain bag which has a virtual version. And that virtual version of the bag actually sold for more money than the same bag in real life, right? So it gives you a sense of where this world is going, or how money is being spent. And I think that's what one needs to do, is to almost mirror your collections, or you could take a nuanced view and have only a virtual collection, right? But or have virtual only designs as well, right? But really to take this metaverse world very seriously from the start, and sort of build a separate vertical to supply for it, and also not think of it only as a marketing medium, but as a true P&L business, right? And see how far this could scale. And one contrast I would like to share is from the live events business, which was my past life. And there've been concerts in the metaverse with Lady Gaga and Drake and whatnot, and they've sold a ridiculous number of tickets, right? And for a youngster who's between the age of 15 and 19, this is the real world. And I think the sooner and they are our future, and the sooner you appreciate that and the sooner you internalize it, I think it's better for you and your business.
Thank you. And I believe, Raghuram, you've got some insights on how technology adoption in the automotive space, especially around customer buying experiences, has been developed and enhanced through using the metaverse and AXR.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have been luckily part of how things are progressing. Also, the ones that hit the ground in the end. It's not just sitting in the laboratory for somebody to just try and test. But if I look at the adoption in the automotive industry, I would come to the customer buying experience in a while. But if you look at the traditional automotive industry, so you have this really long cycle of product design, development, and production. There is tremendous scope in each of these, and we have tried in different ways to adopt. Of course, up until now, it was very limited to the enterprise that we are working on. For example, I can do a training for somebody within BOSCH, but how do I really create that environment for my dealers sitting at their place to be part of the trainings and really try out the diagnostics, try out the real equipment, and be guided by experts. So these are the real experiences that are being tried out. And one of the example I would like to quote, typically you have this production lines and the stations where where the person is working, usually it costs a lot of money to train somebody whenever the equipment is changed or there is a new person coming in there. So we have brought in some concepts from there wherein you can create a complete simulated environment and also create a gamification of it as to how well have you trained yourself. Are you now muscle trained, because that is the highest level of expertise, because you're really not looking for what is next, but you just keep doing things, or are you looking at what's the next step? And the next step guidance can also be offered using these technologies that we have. Now, shifting beyond the enterprise of an automotive company, shifting maybe on the customer side, I think this is really a new, I would say, a completely new space how automotive companies could engage with their customers. It's not just creating a possibility for them to experience the automobile which they have not bought or they may even want to buy, but also not in terms of just customizing, but also experiencing sitting inside the vehicle and trying out the different accessories and what effects do they have, including customizing and mapping it to the budget preferences that they have. So up until now, most of this is happening in 2D, wherein you go to a dealership or a store where if they are really good, they will have some kind of a simulator to help you run through this whole mechanism. But now this opens up a really great opportunity for people to be really experiencing what they buy and also map it to their budget preferences. Of course, I heard really good stories about how the virtual is slightly more expensive than the real one, and NFT is something that needs is something that can be watched out for. Let's say an NFT of a really high-end luxury car, which probably you would not own in the real world, but you could probably own it in metaverse and traverse the metaverse. And these are these are not imaginary. These are real, as my colleague just now said. That is the real world for the generation that we are working for today. So I see tremendous opportunities for engaging the customers, as well as bringing it back into the enterprise and engaging suppliers, vendors, and dealers beyond the enterprise.
So for you, it's not just a single company. It's making sure that the real world supply chains, the real world ecosystem that make things happen has to be part of the metaverse and has to be built within that metaverse.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I think that is an opportunity and at the same time a challenge to bring up the maturity of the ecosystems. There are big organizations who could invest in this infrastructure and create an environment which supports metaverse in this space. However, we need to also keep in mind that there are other players who contribute significantly, but I don't know whether they are in a position to invest a technology as well as capability in contributing to the metaverse. I think that it would be a real thing to look for.
That's an interesting observation, because that means that you might have less competition for some of the goods that you're trying to sell within the metaverse, especially in the early days, because your existing competitors haven't taken that leap into the metaverse and using that as a new channel to market.
Yeah, that is one way of looking at it, absolutely. But then there is another way, completely different way. You could have automotive companies who only exist in the virtual world and not in the real world, and then you have a completely different space to operate. So you are looking at a very flat world wherein you are not restricted by where you're coming from, but which is the target customer base that you're looking for, and why do they want to be on the metaverse? As I said, you could invent a completely new luxury car which doesn't exist, but it works in metaverse.
And that comes back to my point earlier about the creativity. People might create things in there to see exactly what is the take-up that's going to happen in the metaverse.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let's. I think we need to move on. Salim, what are the hospitable metaverse required to building a basic book of virtual life? How do you see that being created?
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for all the really all the people who give full insights. It was interesting, really. Regarding building blocks for the meta or hospitable metaverse, first we can say that Meta's stated mission is to seamlessly connect disparate environments like work, social media, and gaming, so it can allow people to effectively live and work in the virtual space. Definitely, this will clearly have a significant and sustained impact on our networks. We are not just talking about a need to be constantly connected without glitches. We are talking about fully immersive content streaming seamlessly in either 4K and 8K with low latency and minimal lag. So starting today, we have the opportunity to make the metaverse habitable and hospitable, a place where our virtual selves can thrive, not just survive. So what blocks exactly need? First, bandwidth. Bandwidth is a key. We'll need lots of bandwidth to make this work at scale. Much like water is a building block for life. There is no way we could function in a metaverse without a bandwidth. This is not even in the metaverse. This is in all technologies, especially in 4IR technologies and the emerging technologies or immersive technologies. We need a high-performance connectivity capable of supporting the different demands of bandwidth-hungry applications in the metaverse. And the second block is low latency, which is as critical as air. The first one we saw that bandwidth is as critical as water. The second one is critical as air. Bandwidth is one thing, but if it takes the elevator, we are engaging with several seconds to respond or worse. Then meta life is suddenly annoying and inhospitable. So we already find it frustrating to have lag when streaming live sports or gaming online. And this will only be an interference. And this will only be exacerbated when we are trying to fully immerse ourselves into a virtual world. Where this one, we can say that technologies such as edge computing, which can reduce network latency, and improve reliability will become increasingly important in networks that require real-time responsiveness. Third block is virtual hardware. This is the infrastructure of the metaverse. So after air, water, air, now we are coming to the infrastructure of the metaverse. We have all been there. Hardware breaks, and we need to fix it. In that time, we need to be able to survive without whatever function that piece of hardware operated. But this cannot happen in a metaverse, or at least it shouldn't, because we should have utilized virtualized function for much of what the metaverse requires. And then software intelligence, the mayor of the metaverse. We need the metaverse to be software defined to enable it to act quickly and seamlessly. So it is equivalent of a local government or council being able to repair our roads, remove the trash, and control traffic flows in real time. This generally happens today in real life without us knowing until it stops working and we wonder what happened. Simply put, it is not easy to build a virtual universe, but it is certainly something that we can bring closer to reality through proper network infrastructure, investment, and innovation.
I like your analogies. So air, water, and land all come together to make the fire of the metaverse.
Yes. So that's why, like building anything for that, we need air, we need water, and then we need the infrastructure. Then it came that it came from the back end till the front end. From the infrastructure.
And when you've got all of that, you can actually go forward and you can create excitement and as I said, the fire. Excellent.
Definitely.
So thank you for that. What does this look like from a data side though? And what is important for making sure that we have some sort of seamless transition to the metaverse? Ryan, you've been a bit quiet.
Happy to chip in, John. I think for the transition as a word in itself, I think is an interesting concept within this. And I think there's three parts to me that stand out, and that is the transition between the real world to the virtual, and then from the virtual to other virtual, and then from the virtual back to the real world. And each of those kind of involve different complexities and different requirements depending on your use case. And for this, if we were to focus predominantly on retail, some of the requirements I think you might have for the first part going from the real world to the digital is the ability to capture that real world information. So that might be the case of scanning through photogrammetry or through LiDAR, which is light detection ranging, effectively laser scanning, which is actually becoming consumer grade, which wasn't really possible even 5-10 years ago. The likes of Apple and other technologies are starting to incorporate those into the new tablets and iPhones. And what that enables consumers to do is effectively create a point cloud, a 3D mesh of the interior of a house, of a table, of a chair, of a particular object, of a shoe. They can then do whatever they like with that mesh. They can then, if they have a bit of IT skill, they can then create a 3D model of that to use within computer games or elsewhere, or they could send that mesh to someone else to basically share a 3D model of something rather than just an image. And I think as a whole, I think that's where data is going to go, rather than becoming a 2D that we're very familiar with, from text, images, even video, to very much three-dimensional capture. So once you have that captured, you can then use that as the building blocks to create highly accurate virtual recreations, whether that be a shoe or a building. And if you were to scale that up then and put that same system on the likes of a plane or a vehicle, you could then start to scan cities or towns or villages and create very accurate recreations of those, which may be of interest if you're trying to recreate your retail space pretty much precisely in the virtual experience, allowing your customers to be familiar with the same space so that they can navigate it, so that they're adopting this new technology, but it's not all new. There's a sense of familiarity and realism there. Then again, I think this is where the metaverse comes into its own, is that transition between virtual and virtual. And that's where I mentioned earlier about the system of systems. So we have the minute isolated virtual reality experiences or isolated augmented reality experiences. But as a customer, if you go in and you purchase a video game, and within that video game, you then purchase a small pair of jeans or a shirt or a cap or a particular item to customize your character to sort of say, this is me representing myself in this virtual space while I play, I don't know, the Fortnite or the games, or even if you were to purchase a car for a racing game. That's isolated. That purchase is less valuable because it's isolated to that one experience. If you could then take that t-shirt or whatever, that item that you've purchased, and use it in other games over a long, prolonged period of time, that value increases because you can then reuse that item multiple times. The same way you could go into a shop in the real world and purchase a suit or purchase a t-shirt or a cap, and you can take it to a sporting event or you can take it to multiple events. It has more value to you because you can reuse it. It's not just you don't buy a sports cap, you can only use it at that team sporting events. You can use it in every day, but it also means then there's a connection there. With that real to virtual, where if you go into a shop and you purchase a t-shirt, you could then potentially get a code that will enable you to unlock the virtual version of that t-shirt so that you can customize your avatar the same way you would have your own wardrobe. And then finally, when we're moving then from the virtual back into the real world, I think that's where augmented has a huge role to play. And as we become a little less disconnected from the augmented experiences, the likes of having to hold our phones up and things, you can then have augmented glasses and be able to walk through stores. Stores can then become more customized to the consumer. So it's very much focused on that human factors thing, whether it be issues related to color blindness, language barriers around prices or reading signage, and also additional information in terms of sustainable tracking of those products in terms of the embodied carbon within that product and that supply chain. And ultimately, I think as well, this can help bring the consumer closer to the product. So we know anyway, when you go into a store, if the customer picks something up and they're touching it, they're feeling it, they're more likely to purchase it because it creates a strong psychological connection to that product of ownership. And there's starting to look at sort of using virtual and augmented reality to bring the person closer to the product virtually without them actually touching it and creating that strong sense of ownership before they even have it. So there's a lot to cover without going into the nitty gritty of fine kind of data types and formats and things, but I think there's a lot of potential there.
There is, and it's quite interesting. You brought a certain amount of humanism to it around, you know, me, myself, I want to be known, I want my identity, I want my brand, you know, if it's jeans and t-shirt or if it's something else, and I want that brand in all the games that I do, because I want to build a social community. So this new virtual environment, users will start interacting with each other across the planet, across different games. Will we see a new language? Will we see dialects? Will we see new gestures and emojis? And you know, what is that communication going to be like? So SHIJU, I think you had some burning points to make on this, but also the rest of the panelists, think about anything you want to contribute.
Yeah, John, I personally think language is going to be a huge critical point in terms of how individuals would interact and enterprises would interact on the metaverse. Let me step back and give the genesis, which we all know, but just trying to remind everybody that the transition from English to emojis was an experience we've all witnessed. We've all used it. We've all watched how that has evolved. And we've seen that within the digital culture, that from your mainstream language that you're using, it has totally kind of changed back where currently that the language has evolved up to. Kids have been using dots, circles, and symbols and those kind of language. It's moved into emojis. It's kind of moved into stickers. It's kind of gestures and all those kind of communication channels that they're being used to till now. I think the metaverse will take the digital communication, the form and the factor into a different space. The guest would be good. I would like to listen to other experts here, how that would be going forward as we would see. Some early insights we can see because gaming is pretty much in terms of advance, in terms of where this has evolved. We have seen the language where it has moved from different kinds of interactions in the gaming world. We talked about the Roblox and the Epic and the Fortnite games, all these different kinds of tools that our kids and the gaming community has been using actually. So definitely that does extend. So that will depend on the popular culture that's out there. The question here would be, how does this language that we have will interact with the enterprises? Let me give you a real life analogy or possibly an example. When let's say I believe Raghu was talking on the automotive. When you actually go to purchase a car, there is a way how the sales scripts are being designed. The sales script is basically talking about let's go to a 360-degree view of the car in terms of the purchase. Open the door, put them in the driver's seat, maybe take them to the hood, show the passenger seat, and then to the trunk. This is a universal example of how the language is set up. In the metaverse, possibly enterprises will have opportunities whereby this can be standardized. Sales scripts can be created today, my language of how I would explain to a customer would be totally different from my colleagues. Enterprises would be able to get these standardized and give the explanation and the experience and the language and the tone in which how that's communicated to the customer will be very standardized. So the customer experience will be amazing. So I think those are some real good use case that we can see possibly how enterprises can take advantage of the metaverse. But yeah, we will definitely see a huge significant changes in terms of how language is going to evolve. Already we have a huge number of companies which are actually focusing on language capabilities, the tone, the textures, etc., and those ones. So definitely we would love to see how that would focus, but I think there is going to be some change there.
Excellent, thank you. Any other comments from the esteemed panel? Okay. So how has LENSKART as a brand embraced all the metaverse and the world of AI and AR? So SUDHIR.
Sure. I think first part is in terms of AI AR with our 3D try-on that we have at our store, and it's both on the mobile app but also on the store at the store, which allows you to sort of virtually represent how you might look. However, the metaverse is very much a part of our plans as we progress, right? I can't share too much information, but what I can say is that, like other fashion brands, we are actively looking at the space. And what we've realized while looking at the metaverse is that at one element, it's digital goods and tokens and produce, but at the other end, it's also events, right? And we've seen that events in the metaverse, events like concerts or like a fashion show and things like this are really where engagement happens. And it's all about how do you engage and how do you get a cool community to come together and engage with your brand. And in order to do this, it's a lot like the real world in terms of creating participative opportunities to do so, right? That's at one end. I think the other thing we should also think about as business leaders is what is the tipping point for us to believe that the metaverse is beyond a marketing need, is also a source of revenue as opposed to only being a source of marketing, right? And I think about 10 years ago there was this whole Second Life wave, right? And there was also the Google Glass wave, and there were Pico projectors, and they all died a healthy death, right? So at what point, what is this tipping point for us to realize, hey, is the metaverse another fad, or is this for real, and is this a real revenue making opportunity? And I think as business leaders, we all need to keep our eyes peeled to what's happening in the metaverse, and our ears to also look at the impact on our cash registers.
Excellent observations, and thank you for sharing what you can share, and perhaps later you can share all the other secrets.
maybe on the metaverse.
So Salim, so what, to get engaged in the metaverse, to be part of that ecosystem, what sort of equipment do I need to get involved and have? How simple is it?
Before, yeah, I remember the one thing that earlier this year, Microsoft recently said it would buy Activision Blizzard for $69 billion. I don't know if you have read about this one.
Yes,
explaining
yes.
the deal was part of an expansion into Metaverse. And last year also, Facebook rebranded itself as a Meta. So this is required a lot, not even coming and do this one. And not to the social networks' ambitions to be a prime mover into the next step into in the internet. Rec Room and world-building games like Roblox and Minecraft, as I said, all get rolled into discussion of what the metaverse is.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Anything?
No, carry on.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So what kind of equipment do we need to enter the metaverse? Of course, that depends on where you want to go. When I say you, the organization or ourselves itself, Facebook wants you to buy one of its Oculus Quest 2 VR headset that will set you back, I think, $300. Although the hardware is self-contained and doesn't require a PC or game console to use. There are also a number of other VR headset makers, like, for example, Valve, HTC, HP, and Sony, whose gear works with the PCs or a PlayStation. Expect more headsets, some of which might start connecting with phones by the end of the year. Definitely, that because the technology is developing each day. A handful of other companies, Microsoft and Magic Leap, to name a couple, make AR headsets which layer digital information on top of the real world, and they tend to be a lot more expensive. Qualcomm and other companies are developing methods for AR glasses to work with phones. So most applications so far have remained experimental and business focused. Snap's prototype AR glasses, or glasses like the Unreal Light, show how much work is still needed to make them a purchase you have even considered. Now, you can also enter existing metaverse such as Roblox and Minecraft from your computer, tablet, or phone. It is not a 36-degree experience, but the popularity of these platforms speaks to their appeal. So that's all. What kind of equipment do we need to enter the metaverse?
Thank you. It sounds very simple. I probably need to go and buy an AR set.
Yes.
In this evolving space, though, with all these new technologies, and you highlighted that there are some challenges around technology and future-proofing the technology because it's moving so fast.
Yes.
What other practical challenges would one come across when considering building solutions for XR and thereby extending the metaverse? So, Raghuram, could you give us some insight?
Yeah, I don't want to pour water over whatever was discussed until now. But nonetheless, I think it's also important for practitioners and people who would want to work with metaverse and consider metaverse to be also aware of how things are evolving. It's in the end, it's just a matter of being practical. So at a technology level, we have to look at the building blocks. So you have the XR technologies, then you have the IoT part of it, then you have the cloud. One of my colleagues talked about the responsiveness. On the IoT side, we still have a challenge with respect to the sensing resources. Why do I say that? Is the amount of information that is required to provide that seamless experience to the user or your avatar. It requires a tremendous amount of investment in creating that data set and this whole thing is integrated using, let's say, a set of IoT stacks, and that gets integrated into your cloud technology as well as XR. So this whole convergence, on one hand, it's very exciting. On the other hand, we also have to keep in mind that it's a evolving thing. Yeah, that's the first thing. The second part of it is, as many of us would have already guessed, it's extremely intensive when we talk about resources, whether it is compute resources, whether it is energy resources, whether it is resources coming from data spaces. So we still have to, probably we are getting there with, in my view, a 2D kind of environment with cloud and IoT. But when we get into a 3D kind of an environment, it's a totally different ball game. how do you allocate resources? Where do you plan to have contingency? Where do you have to have buffers so that, I mean, you can, when there is a game going on and somebody is just trying to entertain himself, it's still okay to have a different experience with respect to resources. But if you build a real use case, which is probably one of the central piece for somebody to sell a product, you can't have jitters, and you can't have challenges with experiencing the product and trying it. So these are the challenges when it comes to managing and allocating resources. Yeah. So that is the second piece of it. The third piece of it, which is one of the most essential here, is the spatio part of it, right? You are in a new 3D environment, and to be able to accurately envision yourself and the person in the same environment, there is some distance to go with respect to location, orientation, interaction, and all of these have a bearing on, let's say, the realism of assets in this metaverse, and that is a problem that is still being worked on, and which means that there is a lot of work to do. But also, as any technology which is evolving, there are opportunities for the early movers. Yeah, I think while I don't want to get into the data security part of it, because then it opens up a completely new Pandora box. But that is,
I think you're right.
But that is a discussion in itself. Yeah.
That's a really good insight. I'm afraid we've run out of time. I think we've only just scratched the surface. I think all of us could be on here for probably a couple of days, taking it to a greater set of depths. But I would like to thank all of you for your time, your input, your insight on this subject. And Roger, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our eminent panel members, Sudhir, Ryan, Dr. Salim, SYJU, Raghuram, and of course, you, John, our panel moderator, for the interactive and extremely insightful panel discussion around building an integrated infrastructure for a better metaverse to ensure seamless VR and AR experiences. Thank you once again for giving us your precious time for this summit, and I hope all of you have a lovely day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Nice to all. Thank you.